Dear viewers, welcome to yet another edition of Expert Speaks. Who hasn't heard about the nominations? Nominations is a word we keep hearing day in and day out. If you have an intention to pass on your assets to next of generation, nomination is a must. The simplicity ends there, but there are complex issues. There are things you need to know. There are things you have to take care. All these aspects we are going to discuss in this video. This is NRI Money Clinic for you, and I am Dr. Chandrakant Bhatt, your financial guide for a happy living.
NRI Money Clinic. No hype, just the right advice.
3 years or more. That's how long it can take for your family to recover your assets. This delay in asset recovery means your loved ones won't have access to their inheritance when they need it the most. Create your will today.
Dear viewers, to talk about the nominations and all aspects you have to keep in mind when you are doing the nomination, I have called for this episode my eminent faculty, popular person on my channel, Mr. Nikhil Wagis. Mr. Nikhil Wagis is a chartered accountant by profession. He has worked for the big four auditing firms. He was heading the wealth management and succession planning division of a wealth management company till he started his own startup by name Yellow. Yellow is a dedicated startup to bring you the technological platform to do the wills, to democratize the creation of wills for the benefit of the society. They have done great works. They have done those videos on my channel earlier. You have all liked this video. Today Nikhil Wagis has come back again to talk about the most important aspect of nomination. Welcome to this show, Mr. Nikhil Wagis.
Thank you, Mr. Chandrakant. It's an honor to be part of your show. And as usual, typically I get good amount of responses from your audience, good interactive questions that comes our way. It's always an pleasure to have these interactive conversations with you and with your audience. It's a pleasure to be on this show.
Thank you, Nikhil, for your time. To start with, what are the things people should keep in mind when they talk about nomination? We know nomination as a word, a tool which will help to transfer assets to the near and dear ones. What are the things the general public need to know about nominations?
Great question. As a general rule, nomination is a process where you appoint someone who you trust to ensure your assets are taken custody when you're not around, right? Essentially, you're nominating someone in before financial institutions or Demat account or whichever those organizations are, to say that if I'm not around, please pass on these assets to the person who I've nominated. Now, what is the relevance of it? Why did nomination come into the picture first of all, right? Look at a scenario where there is no nomination in place, every family member will have to go to these financial institutions and prove that you are the legal heir, provide all the documentation that each of them would ask for various other documents, which otherwise also happens, right? To add to that complication, these situations come in, and banks and other financial institutions, to ensure that they are not at risk, they will try and take as much protection as possible, which kind of creates a good amount of distress for families. To kind of avoid all of this, RBI and SEBI and other financial regulators have come up with a process saying that get a nomination in place so that you as financial institutions, as Demat account holders, various asset holder, you can discharge your liability by passing on these assets to the nominee, and you won't be further questioned and you don't have any further liability. It's a clear discharge of liability, and that's the whole reason why nomination has come into the picture. But many don't realize the importance of nomination, because recently you would have heard about 35,000 crores of unclaimed deposits moved from PSU banks to RBI. This is because families are not creating nomination. These assets have become inoperative for a long period, and they've moved to RBI kitty for further utilizations, right? Therefore, it's very important to have nominations in place. Without nomination, the whole claim process, transfer of asset process becomes highly tedious and time consuming, and good to have somebody who trust, most scenarios somebody who is your actual beneficiary, to be the nominee. But I made an important point, actual beneficiary to be a nominee. Probably I should have addressed this first, is that by law, nominee is not the actual beneficial owner of the property. In most cases, a nominee is just a trustee to the asset. If a legal heir who is the actual beneficial owner of these properties. How is legal heir defined? Legal heir is defined either by your Indian succession laws, or if you've written a will, the wishes as per your wish they become your legal heir for claiming the benefits.
Thank you, Nikhil. Dear viewers, after I heard Nikhil, 3 points stand out for me. Nomination is a facility wherein which institutions will discharge their responsibilities for the assets that are parked with them. They are done with it. It doesn't mean that it has moved to the legal heir. A nominee, in most circumstances, is the trustee of these monies or the assets. He is not the beneficial owner. He is not the ultimate beneficiary of the monies that he is going to receive. He has a responsibility to transfer it to the legal heir. If you are a person who is a legal heir for these monies and you realize that the nomination was done in a friend or somebody else's name, it doesn't mean that you don't have a claim on these monies. You can request or file or make the nominees pay this money to you as you are entitled by law. You have to keep in mind, there are many instances where I have heard people telling me that my dad nominated somebody and he didn't pay the money. No, he is just a trustee. You have a claim, you can follow the law and you can make him cough up that particular money. Nevertheless, it also goes to say that you have to be careful while you are nominating. Don't casually nominate some person. There should be certain precautions which should go with it. Nikhil, can you tell me what are the precautions people have to keep in mind while they do nominate for the different assets that they have?
Absolutely, there are few things that one should keep in mind with respect to nomination. Like you rightly said, the general rule is that nominee is not a beneficiary. But I also carefully use the word in most cases, and that's something which we need to also elaborate here, is that there are certain exceptions to this rule. Situations like if you have nominated someone in your life insurance, if you have nominated someone in your PF, PPF, pension funds like gratuity, etc. If you were to nominate someone there, they also become a beneficial owner, and it's not your Indian succession law, your will, that kind of defines who the actual beneficial owner here is. It's the actual nominee also becomes the beneficial owner. This is an exception to the rule, applicable only to these few class of assets, not for all class of assets. For the rest, everywhere, the nominee is not a beneficial owner. Nominee is just a trustee. Now, moving forward from here, how should one look at, and why is this point very important? Because here also, while it's an exception, there are certain limitations with respect to who can be nominated in these exceptional scenarios also. For life insurance, it can't be anybody and everybody being nominated. It's only person with insurable interest who can be nominated. Second, when you look at PF, PPF and other asset categories, there it's again only the family members who can be appointed as a nominee, and the law goes to the extent to say that if you have nominated someone before marriage, you are also required to update your nomination post marriage. If not, it can still be nullified. Essentially to say that if you've not made a right nomination as per these regulations, then the nominee becomes null and void, which would mean that your Indian succession law, your will, stipulates how the asset needs to be distributed. Therefore, it's very important to carefully see, are you making the right nomination, and make sure that they fit within the whole scheme of things. In a general rule of thumb here, as long as you're nominating your family members, which is your immediate bloodline, there should not be any concern per se from a nomination standpoint when you look at these exception scenarios. But having said that, very important, always have nominations in place. If you don't have nomination, the whole process of claim of assets becomes extremely difficult. And along with it, have a will. And as long as you align your nominations with your will, the possibility of one delay in claim of asset becomes very minimal. You can claim the assets as quick as 15 to 30 days. Otherwise, situations like where you don't have nomination and you don't have will, you have to run pillar to post with respect to getting succession certificate, inheritance certificate, family tree. All these nomenclatures and certificates are different across jurisdictions. You run pillar to post to get all these documentation before you can start the claim process itself. and therefore it's always one's responsibility who's creating assets and ensuring that these assets needs to go to your loved one. Let them not be put to pain, but create this financial hygiene of create nomination, align your nominations with your will, so that the whole transfer process becomes easy and very seamless.
Nikhil, I heard you. But see, it looks very simple. But in life, there are complicated situations which will be there. A simple case to look at is if somebody has a joint account, and especially the joint accounts between two individuals who are not the family members, or it may not be an husband and wife joint accounts. So in such cases, how does the nomination works? What care has to be taken, or what rights are there for the legal heirs of one of the joint account holders?
Great question again. Joint account, we need to look at it from the base of how the construct of the joint account itself is, and that's where the inheritance etc. comes into the picture. Basically, there are multiple ways of how one could open up a joint account, but if I have to make it simpler and make into two parts, broad two parts. One is to say that it's a simpliciter joint account where you have either not defined your share or you defined your share with respect to how much is each party's share in the account. Second is to say, similar to various nomenclatures here, but broadly if you were to capture it, it's a either or survivor, which is the most popular kind of creating joint accounts. Now, why is this difference or nomenclature in a creation of joint account important? Because your inheritance or how the asset ownership transfer is depend on how you open your joint account, right? Now look at a simpliciter joint account. If you don't put a percentage, it's assumed equally held by all joint account holders. And if one were to pass away, one of the joint holders were to pass away, his or her share will be transferred to their legal heir and doesn't go to the remaining joint account holders. It has to go to their legal heir. Now, what is the legal heir here? Is either your will, which defines who the legal heir is, or your Indian succession law. Going forward for this entire conversation, we'll just understand that legal heir is essentially a will or legal heir as defined by the Indian succession law in the absence of a will, right? So, in a joint account where nothing is defined, 50-50% is if you assume two joint account holders. If one person passes away, that 50% interest or right in the joint account gets split between the legal heirs. But when it comes to a situation of a either or survivor account, right? There, the survivor becomes the sole owner of the property, and only when all the joint account holders are not in existence is where the legal heirs comes into the picture. Now, from a transaction standpoint, what would happen is that, say there is a joint account between husband and spouse in either in survivor stature. In that case, what happens is that, say if the husband passes away, then the wife becomes the sole owner, and if they have nominated someone, post the demise of wife, the asset goes to the nominee. Now it's the legal heir who gets access to these assets, though it goes to the nominee because it's a bank account which is not falling within the exceptional rule. But if the nominee is also say it's one of their kids, and if the nominee is also the beneficiary as per the will that they have drafted, then it becomes foolproof. It going to the nominee who is also the legal heir as per law, and the asset gets transferred. But the important point here is that it's usually assumed that joint account, if you open a joint account, the person surviving will get the entire asset, which is not the fact. Unless it's a either or survivor account, it's not that the survivor gets the entire access to the assets. The legal heir have complete access to those assets, though this account has a survivor. Ensure what your nomenclature is, and basis that is where you can define how the succession of those assets happen.
Nikhil, see, NRIs are there all over the globe, and systems there are slightly different. I'm just asking you a question here. Is there a system where in a bank accounts or in case of mutual fund, there are multiple nominees who can be mentioned with a share? But when it comes to question of joint accounts or individual account in the banks, is there a facility where they can nominate multiple nominees with a share mentioned against their name? Or is there a system where they can mark a contingent nominees like what is there internationally? If the primary nominees were to be not there, and the monies will move to the contingent nominees. Is that system present in India?
Unfortunately, our nomination system in India is different across various institutions. Unfortunately, that's the case, right? Like you rightly said, for mutual funds, you can have, or even for that matter, even your demat account, you can go down and say how many nominees and what should be their percentage interest in the property. But for bank, you can only have one nominee, right? And that needs to be something which needs to be provided. And similar is the case with various other, each of them have their own formalities. PPF has a nomination which is highly cumbersome in terms of capturing it. You need Aadhaar, you need photograph of the nominee, a lot of things to be done there. Right? Each system has, or each institution has their own processes. But this Indian system on a broader level has one underlying theme, which is that nominee is one person. And it stops there. There's no concept of contingency. Now, also let's understand why that is not even relevant. Is for the fact that nominee itself is not a beneficiary to the assets, right? Nominee is just a custodian or a trustee to the asset. But I understand where you're coming from. Is say if the nominee is not around when the situation arises, then unfortunately the account goes without nomination, and therefore it's very important you write a will so that can help you with the overall transfer process. Second, also take stock of your accounts on a regular basis. Who has been the nominee? If that person is not around, it's your duty to go back and update the nomination so that tomorrow there's no situations of these arising. Of course, if contingency arises, that needs to be dealt with. But to the extent everything, wherever it's in your control, we can go back and update those situations.
Nikhil, this is a knowledge part. But the implementation practical side, there are issues or there are lapses which will happen. Somebody nominates and the names are not correctly spelled. The surnames are not spelled. Let's say that somebody nominates as Suresh. Who is Suresh? There are lakhs and lakhs of people with the same name Suresh. How will I identify? Or somebody nominates, let's say a new graduate nominates his mother, and he makes some investment. After some time the mother is not there in this world. He gets married and he doesn't know where the investments are. Or the person who has been nominated cannot be traced. He moves to another geography. So can you tell, for the benefit of our viewers, these are the things which have to be looked in either at the time of nomination or on a regular basis? What is that they have to do?
Great question once again. Very important aspect to be kept in mind because again, everybody looks at succession, creation of will, nomination as one-time exercise. Unfortunately, that's how our mind is tuned to kind of do things, but unfortunately that's not the case. Life is dynamic. There will be additions in the family, there will be deletions in the family, there will be changes in your asset profile. And there'll be changes in the jurisdiction of the people, right? And therefore, all these are aspects that will impact one's asset that you're creating and its seamless transfer to your loved ones. Therefore, considering or assuming that everything is not fluid, it's going to be a status quo is a biggest mistake that one could make. We should assume that everything is dynamic, and as things changes, you should also make relevant updates, etc., so that tomorrow there is no scope for loss of assets in the transmission process. Now, why all this statement? Very important is that one, we spoke about 35,000 crores of unclaimed deposits that moved to RBI. If I look at, that's only deposit. If you look at the overall headline number, we're talking about 1,50,000 crores plus assets of unclaimed assets in India, or unclaimed accounts in India, which are hard-earned money of people like you and I, and that needs to go down to the loved ones. Why it is not happening? Because there is no clear information that is passed on from the asset owner to the beneficiaries. When the information is not passed on, how do you expect them to claim the assets? That's the biggest loophole which is there. And it's not that, like you rightly said earlier, it's not that various of these institutions will figure out who the nominee is, even if there's no nominee, who the legal heir, and pass on the assets. They don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth, and the regulations don't require them to do it. Then why will they step out of their comfort zone and do it, right? Unless somebody is forward thinking, will do some of these aspects, but that's not the case, and therefore there is a huge gap, and it's our responsibility to create that financial hygiene in place so that your loved ones don't suffer when you're not in this world, right? Some of the important tips here that one should look at is clearly, there could be various names and mismatches in your KYC document, be it Aadhaar, PAN, passport, etc. Good practice is that your nomination, the name as per your nomination, what you provide in the nomination form should align with the KYC document, so that tomorrow there's no question of saying, is the right person coming for the claim? Point number one. Second, if there are mismatch within these KYC documents, it's our responsibility to get those mismatch to be aligned. It's not a big deal. Most of these things can be done online. PAN can be updated online. Aadhaar can be updated online. It's just that you need to spend one weekend instead of binge watching Netflix. Probably you can do these financial hygiene. It just takes so much time. Right, but we put this to the back burner. Along with having these hygiene in place of having nominations for all the assets, it's very important for us to also take a stock of saying, is our nominations valid, right? There can be changes in your family situations, and therefore on a time to time basis, we should go back and start updating your nominations so that it's up to date and current, and you don't want to have a situation where when the time comes, the nominee is also not around and it's as good as not having a nomination. So that's very important. From a NRI standpoint, because there is a lot of pain for you to be in India, get your things sorted, it's important that you, one, take care of this for your Indian assets. Second, for your families or parents who are in India, ensure this is getting done. Right? Otherwise, it's you who will be spending time and efforts and doing all of this in India to get things sorted. And end of the day, though you get these assets, you are also not happy, or having this whole moment being so pleasurable in terms of getting these assets. You need, because it gives you a lot of pain with respect to dealing with various authorities. And the other aspect here which is important is, of course, while having nomination in place, it's always a good practice to have a will, because we have emphasized this time and enough now that nominee is just a trustee. Having a will which aligns with nomination ensures it's a foolproof way of asset transfer. Your nominee becomes also a beneficial owner because your will and the nomination is aligned. And on a time to time basis, update your will so that this is also given complete effect, like you take care for the nomination. And one other aspect which is very important is look at professionals in India who can help you with the overall transfer process itself, because the transfer of assets in India is extremely painful and time consuming, especially for NRIs, like I discussed earlier, because one, you have to spend time and effort in India to get these things done. Second is that the whole process is, you're not equipped to do it, because each financial institution have their own processes, each sub-register have their own processes, and it's extremely painful, and there's no clear timelines that is suggested. You need to navigate through the hoops and loops before you get things done. So professionals like us can help you with the overall asset transfer process post one's demise, and we cover this as part of our executor support services, which we call it as Yellow Smart. If you subscribe for it, we will be there to take up the entire load from your back, and we run on behalf of your family to ensure that all the assets transfer at the fastest and the cheapest way possible. And last but not the least is that inform your beneficiaries and family members about, one, the assets that you have in place, second, that you have who is being nominated there. And this it need not be that you need to tell them orally and they need to remember and all of it. A good will in place will capture all these asset registers along with nomination details and whatnot, and all that you need to inform your family members is that there is a will. Ensure my wishes are given effect to as per the will, and that will kind of take care of it. More important point is that information needs to pass on to the family about the assets, so that they don't need to figure out what assets you held, and more importantly, your family assets are not getting contributed to the 1,50,000 crores of unclaimed pool in India. Very important aspect that each one of us as asset owners take this responsibility, so that your families don't suffer because of your carelessness in not acting in time.
Dear viewers, for your benefit, now we have partnered with Yellow. Be it creation of wills online, Be it subscribing for executor services, or you have an issue in inter-domiciliary transfer, or you just need a consultation for your inheritance to be transferred from India to some other country, you can make best use of services provided by them. How to reach them? You can just send us a WhatsApp message on the number that we have shown here on the screen, or we have provided a link in the description box. Click on the link, it will take you to the WhatsApp and you can send us a message. When you reach to them through us, needless to say, in your best interest, we have worked out the best possible discount available for you. Do make best use of this. If you have an issue and you need some help, do not hesitate, send us that message now. Dear viewers, just think about it. You spend so much time, you upskill yourself, you put so much of efforts to build those assets. One small step you neglect and these assets may not get transferred to your kith and kin, and that may not be the happy situation for you. Take that action now, be it nomination, be it creating the wills, whatever it takes to smoothen this journey from you to your next one. Time to take that action is now. Thank you, Nikhil, for your courtesy to come all the way here. Thank you.
Thanks a ton for inviting me here for your show once again, Mr. Chandrakant. It's always a pleasure, like I said, to interact with you. And what a gem of a closing statement that you made, that you spend so much time and effort creating all the assets that you need, but miss out on that last step to ensure these assets pass on to your loved ones. Who are you creating these assets for? It needs to move to the loved ones. Take that action today, and like you said, we will offer the best we can for your set of audiences. Just ensure that you give us the reference that you are coming from NRI Money Clinic and as a reference, and we'll do our best in giving the right discounts for you all. Thanks once again, Mr. Chandrakant, to invite me for this interesting and interactive conversations on nominations. Look forward to few other conversations that we could have depending on what questions your audience has with respect to inheritance. My pleasure once again to be part of this show. Thank you once again.
Dear viewers, hope the video that I have done today helped you to understand all aspects of nomination. Do take that step which will protect your families. Thank you very much for watching this episode on NRI Money Clinic. If you are yet to subscribe for the channel, do hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon. And by the way, don't forget to share these videos with your near and dear ones and the friends and relatives. I shall be back with you with yet another episode of Expert Speak next Tuesday. Till then, stay safe.
Press the bell icon for more details and subscribe our channel.